My name is Gregory MacDonald. Right now, I'm a senior student at UMass Amherst studying psychology. As the summer of 2025 is coming to a close and the fall is panning itself out, I'm really thinking and contemplating to myself, what systems and operations am I able to implement into my life to get the best version out of myself, to get the most results out of myself that I possibly can? With that said, I cannot think of a better time to publish this conversation between my dear friend Connor Casey and I. Connor is also a senior at UMass, among many other disciplines, studying quantum physics. Quantum physics and psychology relate to one another in the sense that we don't really know much about it. One time, Connor told me, if you think you know what you're talking about with quantum, you're on the wrong track. Carl Jung used to say, we don't really know much about our mind at all. I think that's more prevalent now than ever. Connor is the epitome of success. Connor is the epitome of excellence. And if anybody were to ask me for advice on success and excellence, I would give them a one-way ticket right to Connor's doorstep. Now, I'll allow Connor to explain exactly why I think that. I hope you enjoy the time that you have with Connor and I. We will talk soon. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So, let's see. Well, I'm Connor Casey.
Yeah.
Currently a rising senior here at UMass. So, my journey to UMass has been a little bit non-linear. So, I am from Leominster. I grew up thinking that I was going to be a doctor. And for me, I think it was your classic case of you take someone that is really interested in science and grows up going through a lot of different medical issues, and doctors always seems like the path that you want to choose, right?
Yeah.
So I think with that, I was really involved in medical research in high school, and I sort of saw UMass as this place where, you know, they have a phenomenal research facilities here. There, it was close to home, which was important. So you look at all those factors and ended up at UMass. I came to here as a biochemistry major, and for me, I'd only ever seen myself as a doctor. So when first semester of college rolled around and I was taking all my classes and really getting into the pre-med curriculum, I started having this doubts of what I want to do with my life. And I think for me, it was interesting, right? Because it was scary. It was, your image of yourself is now totally different, but I kind of used it as an opportunity to start exploring, because given that only image of myself was a doctor, right? I sort of turned that analogy around and said, hey, it's scary, but also we're young. This is exciting. We can really see myself as something else, and what do I want to do with my life, right? So it's an area of opportunity for me. So started exploring. My dad actually works in business, so I think there was always that was close to home. So, and I also think broadly speaking, being fluent in the language of business, if you will, is always something that can be helpful given everything. So started learning about business and finance, and they always said, investment banking is the most competitive area in finance, right? And as a former athlete, a former swimmer, I was instantly drawn to that. There was, you hear about the long hours, you hear about the camaraderie, and was really drawn to that. And also you hear about the paycheck, right? And I think that's a key theme, was I wanted to follow the paycheck. So end of freshman year, I switched into Eisenberg. I was a double major. So at that point, I was a biochem major and a finance major. I had an internship that summer doing private equity in Boston, and loved it. I thought that was my life's calling. I said, if I could stay here for the next 4 or 5 years and work my way up, I can see myself. This was an internship. I could see myself as a career, though. So I made the decision the following year and for backdrop, this was during COVID, right? So decided to make the choice to actually pursue a co-op. So did back-to-back co-op internships, worked in New York City, did technology investment banking, kind of following on that path of the business. And for me, it was being drawn to tech was, I think, primarily inspired by my older brother. So he's a software engineer. My dad, for example, had worked in business my entire life and was working in cloud computing. So everyone called him Cloud Casey.
Nice.
So, I learned and grew up thinking and hearing about cloud and what is cloud, right? So I think there was always a chip on my shoulder to understand actually what my dad actually did, which kind of drew me to investment banking, and, did that for a year and really loved it. I thought, I loved finance, and then combine it with a sector that I could really learn and understand. I said, this is great. But again, I think what I realized about myself was I love to understand foundations and understand how things work. So what I did was I came back to campus, was, a sophomore, and ended up adding a computer science major. Why? Because I had worked in technology investment banking, and I realized that no one that I worked with really understood the actual technology, right? And for me, being well-rounded, I just wanted to be kind of, I'm a huge believer in multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. And I thought, working in the business side of technology, understanding the tech is only going to help you. It's never going to hurt you, right? So at this point, sophomore, I'm a triple major in biology and biochemistry. What else? Finance and computer science. And went through all of sophomore year, was recruiting for finance roles in New York, and was fortunate and lucky enough to land at Morgan Stanley. So the summer between my sophomore and junior year, interned there in the city, and that was a really cool experience. I was the only intern in the country to be working on the take private of Twitter with Elon Musk. So was, looking at email threads from Elon, I knew it was going to be called X probably 2 or 3 months before it happened and hit the public. And that I thought was the coolest and the pinnacle. It was, everyone I was working with was saying that was the pinnacle of their careers, right? Like you would never see a deal like that again. And I think for me, that's when tides started to shift a little bit. When I was there and I said, it's cool, the Twitter, the Elon Musk aspect of it was cool, but the actual job I'd never really loved, right? I loved the stuff I was working on in terms of like the tech, but it wasn't actually the business. That wasn't like the day-to-day working in Excel, PowerPoint, whatever it might be, supporting clients. That wasn't something I loved. So I think the following summer I came back to campus and was sort of, doing my best to, do my best at all these internships, but I looked at it and said, I need to find my fit. I didn't ever feel like I found my fit. So ended up going abroad for a year, and I think that was the best decision I've ever made. So I ended up studying at the London School of Economics, and for me it was, I'd never left the country. My first time stepping foot in London was my first time out of the US, and I said, my goal at LSE is to study something that is getting me out of my comfort zone, right? I'm a pretty strong STEM kid. That's what I've been doing my entire life, essentially. So I studied the philosophy of physics, and I went to law school there. And that was, it's the #1 philosophy of physics school in the country, or rather in the world. I actually started there. And it was a great experience. It got my mind breaking in ways and stretching my ways, and I'd never thought that could happen. And also socially, right? You go to a new country with no one and I think that in itself was also valuable. So loved my time abroad, but I think abroad I was really drawn to this one professor who taught all the philosophy of physics classes. And this one class in quantum theory got me so excited about school, unlike anything I'd ever imagined, right? We started learning about general relativity. My final paper for the class was challenging Einstein, and you start learning about, Stephen Hawking and all the great physics minds of the world, and you start understanding how they saw the world and how incredibly different it was. And I think as someone that's always been drawn to academia, that was exciting, right? It was the first time that there wasn't necessarily a right answer, right? Quantum mechanics, there's all this mystery, and it's just as much philosophy as it is science, as it is math, and that excited me. And I, bought my first quantum mechanics textbook and was going so above and beyond what I needed to do in my day-to-day class. And I said, you should follow your passions. That's telling you something. And I kept learning and studying during that entire year. I ended up coming home and I feel like I sort of caught this quantum bug, if you will, right? Around the same time, I also started doing research when I was abroad. Like I had mentioned, I was a computer science major, and at this time, I just, for whatever reason, out of pure interest, I just thought space was cool. And then I ended up meeting some researchers in London that were at another university, and we started writing papers. And I started using my computer science skills to model satellite networks, and just for fun, right? It was just getting back to my research roots, doing something interesting. But for me, it was, I'm gonna go work in finance, right? That was sort of what I had to do. It was what I've done for the last 2 years. It's all my internships have been that. But then I started thinking about it, right? And started thinking about towards the end of my time abroad in kind of April or May, around coming back to campus. I had to do my senior thesis and dissertation. And so I took that and said, what if I use my dissertation as a way to essentially trial run doing a PhD, right? I think my time abroad got me to think a lot. I met some UMass alumni, and I got the itch to do a PhD, right? I'd wanted to when I was younger. I fell out with it. I fell out with medicine. I always wanted to do an MD PhD, but this kind of knack, and it came back, right? And I was like, my time abroad said, whatever your brain is telling you, you need to listen to. So I took it and I ran with it, and ended up reaching out to this professor at UMass named Don Telsley, and had this crazy idea that I basically said, hey, I have this satellite research I've done. I want to learn about quantum. You do a bunch of work in quantum networking. What if I designed my thesis and did quantum satellite networking? Well, comes to find out, it's one of the only places in the country you can do that. He has a grad student that does exactly that. And yeah, so came back senior year, was, going super deep into quantum satellite networking. It was funny, my first semester for my literature review, I was taking 6 or 7 classes at the time, but I had never taken quantum mechanics. I'd never taken any of these foundational courses. So I took an extra 3 courses on top of that. And interestingly enough, it was the busiest I've ever been in my life, but I was also the happiest. So I took all of that and said, this is what I need to do. And I think since in the past year or so, I've gone from, all these different majors and minors, and now I'll be graduating with a degree in applied physics, a degree in quantum science and engineering, which I actually created here at UMass, and then also with my finance degree. And I think for me, the path forward is to really pursue my interest in quantum science and engineering, but more on the physics side. So the goal is to go to a PhD program and then eventually combine this whole idea of quantum sciences and into like the finance startup scene, right? Because I think for me, it was those two together, I think, is where my niche is. So
yeah, that's a lot for sure. And
yeah.
I really appreciate you for sharing that. You talked about how you see yourself and the image of yourself in the beginning of this journey at UMass, and clearly this image has changed throughout, but then you have this underlying passion that drips off of you with that, no matter what you are doing. Obviously, you're getting into the London Economic School, you get into the Morgan Stanley. These are things that people say that they dream for, but then the way you're talking about it is you were just like, I'm going balls to the wall and I'm getting this. And so is that really all it took? Is like you're just going balls to the wall and kind of figuring out exactly, what it takes for this image, because this image keeps changing.
Yeah.
But then what you really are on the inside is just, it's very special.
Appreciate that.
It's very special. And it just keeps running through these images. So it's like, you just want to be the best at everything.
I would say if you boil it down, right, it's really just an image of excellence. And I think a lot of this, if you think of sort of the psychology, like where that comes from, it was definitely from swimming. So my upbringing was in high school. I was swimming at this club called Greenwood Swimming. And in Central Mass, or in Massachusetts, Greenwood Swimming is known to be the most hardcore swim club, right? We might not be the fastest, but we will say we are the type of people we're gonna like whatever we need to do, like whether we need to go through the wall or over the wall or whatever it might be, like we are getting through that wall, right? So our swim coach Don Lemieux, he was like a former Mr. Olympia bodybuilder, and he had this old school grit mentality, right? And it was, if you did and went through Greenwood swimming and did it the way that he told you, and you did all the work, you show up to every practice, and to put in perspective, this is like 8 practices a week, 3 weight trainings. I mean, you were there more than your family, right? Holiday trainings. When you train over Christmas break, I mean, Christmas morning, you're swimming for 3.5 hours. During breaks, you're swimming 2 times a day, swimming upwards of, 20, 25 miles a week. It was a lot. But I think if you just boil that down to very first principles and say, what did that teach me? And he said it all the time. It was not about how fast you were at swimming, right? Majority of the people, 99.99% of people, were not going to be professional swimmers. But what it told you and taught us was, whatever you want, if you work hard enough and you try hard enough, you can get it. But the key is, he always used to say this, you need to do it when no one's watching, right? So we'll take Morgan Stanley, for example. It was an incredible opportunity to get, but the reason things like that happen is because it's the things that people don't see, right? It's the taking all these classes. It's staying up till 2 a.m. every single day. It's getting obsessed with what you are doing, right? Because you might see the achievements on a LinkedIn profile or on a resume, right? But what you're not going to see is things like, I had no social life for those years, right? I worked all the time. You saw me on campus, I looked like I was just rushing to my next class. So for me, it's this sense of laser focus, and it's like laser focused discipline, right? Where it's, if I want something, I am relentless. And for me, there's not a time frame, right? Things happen. If it's whatever dream it might be, I don't set a time frame. I say, I'm going to achieve that, right? And you need to think differently. So for example, we'll take the Morgan Stanley example. Everyone says, oh, you need to network. Everyone at the business school says you need to network. So I don't think that's a great mentality, right? Because if you're just networking for the sole purpose of networking, it's not really gonna get you a whole lot. It kind of takes the human out of it, right? And UMass also doesn't really have alumni in these firms. So what do? Well, you draft cold emails. So I can tell you, over the course of the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I probably sent and had upwards of 100 chats with people, random people. Most of the time it was just a cold email and we had some common interest. Maybe it was as simple as, you're from Massachusetts. And my favorite one is, I have 3 mentors in my network that are all named Connor. And that is literally the email. It says, hey, your name's Connor, my name's Connor, let's chat. And 3 of my closest mentors is because of that email, right? So it's just thinking differently, but you're laser focused on what you want, right? And it's just being driven and you just do it. But the key is to do it when no one's watching.
And that drives you. You're not looking at other people and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I want to be like that person or be like this person. You're thinking to yourself, I want what I want, and I know that the time spent outside of the social scene is what's going to get me what I want. And so, I
think I think that's a fair point. I think for me, over time I've learned to have more balance, for sure. But I will say, I think those who are closest to me know that I am going to be always working very hard, but I'm not going to be the person that says I want to be like XYZ, right? It's sort of like they say in startups. If you're going to be the quote unquote the Uber of so-and-so or the Shopify of so-and-so, you failed, right? If you want to create a truly generational company, you need to be and create the Shopify, the Ubers, right? You can't be the Uber of something else because inherently you're not beating to your own drum, right? So you just need to have, in that sense, the discipline, the self-confidence to know that whatever I achieve, that's for me. And that's what I always say to people, right? It's people say, oh, Morgan Stanley, or we'll say General Atlantic last summer, one of the top PE firms in New York, working there. It's not the firm, right? You could say, you can just boil it down. Like I said, very first principles. Investment banking at Morgan Stanley versus all these other firms is the exact same job. It's the same job, right? But people say you work at Morgan Stanley, it's like you work on Twitter, you work on this. Fundamentally, it's the same job, right? So I think from that perspective, right, it's sort of looking at it objectively and saying, I am doing this for me. I don't need people to glorify me or to put me on a pedestal or whatever it might be. Because at the end of the day, all these things, and if you see my journey, right, I'm doing this for me. Do you know how many people looked at me when I said I'm leaving finance, even though I had this great journey set out for me? So many people, right? That's not a normal thing to do. But if you beat to your own drum and you're doing it for yourself, then you're doing the right thing, right? But if you're not, and you're always wanting to impress other people, whatever, you're not living for yourself. So I think all those things boil down to say, it's one of the reasons also why I can, all these different things I've done, you can switch so quickly, right? It's because there's no time frame. If you don't put a time frame on it, you're just doing because you love it, then, like they always say, if you combine discipline with passion, you will beat anyone all day, right? You can just have hard work, but if you combine hard work and passion, that's the perfect couple.
So then how do you find passion?
I think finding passion, especially in your 20s, is incredibly difficult, for sure, right? So if you just look at how many hats I've worn in the last 4.5, 5 years.
Right.
Well, let's rattle off the list, right? So I was doing medical research in high school. That was on the biochem side, right? So we were doing that. Then I worked in private equity in Boston. Then I worked at a middle market private equity investment bank. Then I worked at Morgan Stanley. Then I worked at General Atlantic. Then I worked at a biotech startup. Then I worked on my own startup. Then I went abroad and learned all about quantum by getting out of my comfort zone. So all of those things, it was just driven by interest, right? It was, we'll take satellites. Why did I start doing satellite research? I just thought space was cool, and I wrote a blog on it, and I was like, this is cool, I'm gonna learn about it. So for me, it's the constant desire to keep learning, right? If you keep your mind open, and I was always open, right? I loved private equity my freshman summer, and I remember literally saying to my parents, I love this, but I need to keep exploring. I'm only 20, I'm only 19, I don't really know what I love, right? Because my definition of love is going to be based on whatever I've had previously. So if you have an experience, it's sort of like they say, like, and this is what I love about philosophy, right? Is whatever, and I bring this is like probably my, if you boil down what I learned from philosophy, it's this. Define everything, right? If I say, I love this, what is love? You always need to ask yourself the question. It's the same thing I have in physics, right? We have an equation. Why is it that? You just need to always be asking, because if you don't keep asking, that's when you get complacent, and that's when you get into situations where people hate their job, whatever. It's because they didn't keep asking, why am I doing this? Right? If you don't like it, leave. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do. But I will tell you, it is better to leave and have no plan than it is to stay and be complacent. For sure, 100%. But if you boil it down, it's asking why about the world around you. And even if you love something, do not pigeonhole yourself, especially in your 20s, right? Your 20s and your late teens are for exploring, and you just have such a small view of the world.
Massive. You must have had some type of insightful experience to have that view in freshman year, because I know a lot of people wouldn't be able to do that.
It wasn't actually freshman year. It would have been, I traced this back. So a story that not a lot of people know about is actually my valedictorian speech of high school. So my senior year of high school, I went in for a routine diagnostic procedure, and it should have been an hour or so procedure, under anesthesia. Went in, came out, couldn't open my eyes. Like, no, it's gonna come back. Long story short, I was blind, completely blind for 7 days. And I was at the #1 pediatric hospital in the world. And the doctor said, we don't know what's wrong with you. We have no clue. We don't know if your vision's ever gonna come back. And it was to the point where at my my high school, they were starting to prepare me to go into the Braille curriculum. And I think when you go through something like that, right, and you start, again, being completely blind, you start realizing the things you take for granted in the world, right? Like something as simple as vision. The second you leave and you don't have vision, it's an incredibly humbling experience. So I think it was that combined with some of the inspirations from my grandfather, for example, that I've always been a person that's been driven by my brain, right? School has always been my thing, right? And it's not necessarily, I mean, everyone has different levels of intellect and what they can do and whatever. But for me, it was, even in high school, right? When I was doing my own drug research, that was inspired by my own issues that I had. Or like my own, like, for example, I had heart surgery in junior year. I designed an entire science fair around it and then became the second top scientific researcher in the state of Massachusetts. But that was not, it wasn't about the award. It wasn't about being second, right? It was I was questioning. I said, I have this condition. Not a lot of people could get surgery. I should design a project to help those that couldn't do it. Can I do it? And then I cold email a bunch of random professors from UMass Medical School, and they made an exception, and I got to work in UMass Medical School. I went there every single day after school, and I completely funded my entire project, right? I was selling cornucopias of candy during Thanksgiving. I did a fundraiser at my Texas Roadhouse, my local Texas Roadhouse. I did like a newspaper ad to raise money, and I completely funded my entire research, right? And at that level of research in Massachusetts, you're competing against kids that, go to all these top prep schools that have all this funding. So it's the underdog mentality. I've always had it, right? Public high school mentality where it's, oh, you're from Leominster, you're never going to make it. Or you're from Leominster, like you can't compete with the big dogs in the science fair. It's like they always say, it's not the size of the dog, it's the size of the fight in the dog, right? So you're taking all those little perspectives, right? And we started with the research and then going blind. I always said, if I get my vision back, I will never, ever waste that potential that I had. And I honestly felt that me just working in finance and chasing a salary was that, right? That was me being complacent. And though this paycheck may be lower, I now know when you're doing science and you're creating things and you're being rewarded for thinking differently, which is inherently not how the business model of finance works. That's, I think, where I really found my fit. But to answer your question, I would say that's probably, I've always thought about where does that come from, right? Because for me, it's an insatiable, I wake up every day. I mean, you have all people, you know me, people say, I'm never off. I'm always the same, energy, right? I don't know where that comes from, but if I had to guess, that's probably where, a lot of it's attributed to.
Okay, so I want to back up for 1 second.
Yeah.
Who showed you swimming?
That's a funny story. So I started swimming in my grandparents' pool. They used to they had this nice pool. All the cousins used to go there in the summer. And I didn't love it. And I'm a twin. So my twin technically, my older brother started swimming first. It was like a one summer thing at our local state pool. Didn't last. He was a golfer. That wasn't his calling. But then for whatever reason, my twin started swimming. And he did it for a summer and was super into it. And around this time, it was when I was 12, right? And 12 is when you're 12 in baseball, it's the 12-year-old All-Stars, which is when you can go to the Little League World Series if you're good enough. Right, and then you go to Babe Ruth is the next league, and that's the bigger kids, whatever.
Okay.
So for me, that was sort of in my brain the decision point where I said, if I want to continue with baseball, I started thinking through, okay, if I do baseball, I want to get recruited, right? And again, I don't know where this comes from. I was always thinking 5 steps ahead, right? It's whatever I'm doing, I'm trying to get a good scholarship to go to school, whatever, right? So because my twin swam, I went to one of his practices, and the coach was like, hey, you should come to practice. And I didn't want to go, right? So I sat in my mom's car and just acted like I was lost and was looking for my goggles, which totally was not the reason. I just was totally trying to skip practice. And then I ended up going and was like, oh, this isn't too bad. And then I started really liking the coach, and then one practice turned into 2, turned into 3, turned into me joining the team, turned into my only sport that I ever did, and I dropped every other sport, right? So we swam 11 and a half months a year. We got 2 weeks off in August, and quickly my twin and I became just obsessed with swimming, and it became a summer sport that was a couple weeks to a, honestly, lifestyle. So, I mean, technically it was attributed to my grandmother, but like I said, I think it was an interesting progression and a funny story to begin.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that the twin aspect here is very interesting. Yeah. That might be a motivating figure in your life Is this a character that
Yeah.
you like and you have a good time and don't fight, or obviously
Yeah. No. Yeah, I think so. My twin's name is Keegan. Keegan and I have an incredible relationship.
Okay.
So I mean, we grew up, right? We always were going to practice together. It was funny. He was the distance person. I was the sprinter. So we've always kind of been mirror opposite twins, but funny enough, we're identical, right? So a lot of people couldn't tell us apart. And but no, I think it was interesting. I think there's always a sense of competition, right? I mean, it's your brother, you want to beat him.
Yeah.
But I think, like we always said, it was never toxic. It was always very constructive. And it was great because it was him and I think were very similar in the sense of how we approach things and how we, we're just very all in. Whenever we were doing it, it was just very focused, very disciplined. Right. And that's why I think it's an element of the way we quote unquote were raised by our coach, right? That was the common factor.
So he was there early, this coach.
Yeah,
in your life.
We started Smith when we were 12, 13.
Awesome.
It's peak adolescent development times.
Right.
Yeah. But no, I think my twin and I, in high school, for example, we were all in the same APs together. And then funny enough, we actually were interviewed by a couple of major news stations in Boston because we graduated 1-2. So during COVID, when all the, news wasn't great about all the different, COVID related lockdowns, whatever, ours was kind of the shining light story where it's, what was it? I think it was twice as nice, 2 twins to graduate 1-2 in Leominster High School class. So I was valedictorian, he was salutatorian. And I think what we'll always say is it's great to have that built-in competition, but there's no person you'd rather lose to than the person that you've seen night and day what they've been doing. It's you respect the competition in that regard.
Dude, that is awesome, man. Really, that's awesome. And it kind of paints this whole picture of this ability to have the passion. So you just said the interests you were talking about earlier, the interests and how to get interested in different things. And then I asked you, what it might be. And you gave me that beautiful story. I think that not a lot of people have a setup like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's the best thing in the world, but the way you have it set up, it might be it's honestly one of the it's like the stars are aligned, dude. Actually, you have a brother that's just a baller, a twin, and then you have yourself that's a baller. It sounds like your dad was a baller too. Was your dad the one that taught you the cold emailing?
No. So I think it's all derivative of my swim coach, right? It's whatever you want, just make it happen.
Yeah, this guy was a massive influence in your life.
He was, for sure, right?
Yeah.
And I think you look at that and say, I think I have taken that to heart. And I think I've even seen it, right? People respond to cold emails, right? It's a thing. A lot of people, and then it's not a coincidence, a lot of my friends that I've met are very similar wired, right? It's if you want something, one of my best friends, he literally wanted to get an internship at this company. So what he did? He emailed the CEO and said, hey, I really respect what you do. I'm really interested in AI and AI research. I want to come to San Francisco. You are one of my role models. I will work for you for free. I want to have the title junior founder or baby founder, and I will do whatever you ask me to do, but I just want to learn from you. Where do you think he's working?
San Fran.
Right? So it's people, especially people that had to be and had to grind and had to work. Grind respects grind,
Yeah.
And people have it or they don't. And if they don't have it, I think you could learn it, but I also think there's a perspective, and this is where the underdog mentality, when you are the only, from a lower income state school or public high school and you're going up to all these kids in science fair, right? You just have to have the confidence that you have outworked them and that you have a different perspective and that you can hang with them, right? It's no different than going to a swim meet. And again, this is where I think it's all derivative from swimming. We swam the most. We had the longest practices. We did miles for time butterfly, right? So when you go to a swim meet and you're swimming 8 laps and you've done a mile butterfly, that's a hell of a lot of confidence that you can have, right? Because you go on that block and no one here has done that, right? So it's the same idea. You do that in school. I do that in research. I do that for presentations, right? I'm doing that now with my internship now. It's a 40-hour-week job, but I come home and I'm studying. Why? Because no one else is doing that, So that's that laser focused discipline is all a derivative of swimming, for sure.
How many people have you seen on your journey that are doing stuff like this?
In terms of
the work ethic, to have an 8-hour day and then come home and maybe study another 4 or 5 hours, maybe even more?
very few. Very few.
Have you came across any?
One of them we got on your podcast.
Dude, that's right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
had you two met before?
No.
No? Okay.
But that's one of the reasons we became really good friends, right? Because you can just recognize someone, like, they stand out like sore thumbs.
Right.
That you're wired the exact same. And that's people like that. If you look at all my friends, I always say all my friends are very different. There's a very common unifying factor among all of them. And there's some sort of, call it, maybe it's a second or third derivative, but it's there, you know? In some capacity, that is a unifying characteristic of a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Yeah, Ryan is a G. He's got 14 publications, like,
Yeah.
just ridiculous. Okay, and you two are both the top of UMass. I mean, as far as last year, I mean, he earned a couple different awards, and you talked about that London economics was only one or two people came to that.
Yeah.
That top echelons, that's like, I was sitting down with my friend Joe Kennedy, the gentleman who works at Conning.
Oh, yeah.
And he told me this story, and he said, he was talking to me about some type of advice, and he said, look, the one thing I do think about is, you know, when is it ever going to be enough for you? Right? He's like, when you go up that mountain and you get to that peak,
Yeah.
and you look around, and then you say to yourself, wait, where's the peak? I got to keep going.
Yeah.
Like, literally at that moment, the way to get another peak is to go back down the mountain to find another peak, and then you have to go back up. So he was like, you might have to find out how to get on that peak and just sit there, you know?
So that's a really interesting point you made there. I'm smiling because I've thought this so many times. I am of the belief that people that are phenomenal, you don't have to have that mindset.
Tell me.
You don't have to be, because in some capacity, right, part of what makes you incredible with that mindset is that mindset, right? So from a say psychological point of view, from a quality of life fulfillment standpoint, people will always tell you, you know, you gotta be satisfied where you are, be happy with who you are. Okay, that's one perspective, and there is value to that. And I will tell you, a lot of my major accomplishments, I remember this so vividly. There's this thing called the Harvard Book Award at my high school.
Okay, tell me.
So it is given out the end of your junior year. They give it to two people. And when you get the Harvard Book Award, that means that you are in the running for valedictorian. So the people that there's two people, right? Valedictorian, salutatorian. When you get the Harvard Book Award, that means if you keep it up for your senior year, you will be valedictorian. So when I was a freshman, I always said, because my older brother was 4 years older than me, so I went to his awards ceremony when I was in 6th or 7th grade, and I said, I want that Harvard Book Award. But for me, it's not. It's not Harvard, right? It doesn't matter that it's Harvard. That is the number one thing that you can get, right? That is what the goal is, right? That is the top of the top for Leominster High School. So, worked really hard, ended up getting the award. I remember my name being called out, and I realized that I was wired this way when I felt absolutely nothing. I was, this is cool. But I thought I was going to be ecstatic, right? I'd wanted it since 6th or 7th grade.
Okay, wait, were you proud of yourself?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, truly, though?
I don't think it's like the classic case, so I didn't stop to smell the roses.
Yeah.
You know, I saw the roses. I didn't smell them, though. Right? And I think I remember vividly, after probably 6 months, I said, this is probably an issue. I should probably work on that. And I did, to an extent. But then I kind of realized over time that's also why I can do what I can do, right? Because I don't stop. It's always the next thing. So if you we'll take the counterexample of you want to be fulfilled, I'm very happy. Why? Because I'm following what I'm passionate about. But my insatiable appetite for success, whatever it might be, is also why I'm wired the way I am. So for me, I'm not trying to damp that. Right? So if you combine it and you're doing passionate, I think you can get that fulfillment aspect. But the other side, I'm just letting that run free. Why? Because I think that's ultimately it's going to be super helpful, you know?
Absolutely, I know. I think actually too, when you talk about, oh, I feel good about myself, be happy with myself, these are all very complacent ideas that I think the majority like to adopt because it's much easier to live something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, you know.
Well, so we'll even harp on that point more.
Yeah.
How many people do you honestly know that say they love their job? Percentage-wise.
Yeah, 1%.
Right.
Yeah.
And who are all the people that are telling you, oh, you should be happy with where you are? And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't be happy where you are. I think you need to have you definitely need to have a flavor of that for sure. But I don't think that you need to be, that's the goal, right? Everyone's inherent, it's like anything else, right? And this is as an aside, whenever you're getting advice from someone, everyone always has bias, right? So you want to read into that bias.
Right.
So everyone's bias from that perspective is, oh, mental health, whatever. Okay, that's important, right? I'm not saying it's not important.
Right.
But, okay, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm happy. I love what I'm doing, right? Even when I'm working all these crazy hours, like I go to bed and I'm like, I'm learning something. We're also in our 20s. I should be maximizing my learning. I can't do this when I'm 50, right? And the idea of compounding says I should do this yesterday. So you look at all that and say, I can pick and choose everyone's piece of advice, but personally speaking, at least for how that adheres to my lifestyle, it's not going to work. It's just, I won't, it's funny enough, it sounds counterintuitive. If I adopt that mindset, I will be unhappy. And I know that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that happened, a point in case is the finance thing when you were working there and you were like, I don't know, man. Like, this isn't just like, this isn't cutting it.
Here's a key difference. That was a case I was unhappy because what I was learning and what the quote unquote the ideas that were compounding were not something that I myself wanted to do, right? For example, saying that, oh, you're a theoretical physicist or you're a quantum physicist, I'm like, that sounds cool. Or someone's like, oh, you're a finance guy. I was like, I'm so much more than that, you know?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, that was an example where it wasn't, oh, I'm not happy with myself or whatever. It was, I like what I'm doing. The work ethics is great. All that time I was doing, I still love finance, right? I don't have any issues with that.
Right.
It was more so like, I just don't want to do that for my career. At least not now, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm of the huge belief that when you're 20 and early 20s, you should always be learning. This isn't just early 20s, you should always be learning, right? And for me, I'm like, in college, I'm going to go to the major that's the hardest so I can learn the most and learn that, you know, physics is arguably the foundations of all of science work. So you should just go learn the foundations. Then over time, you can figure out where you want to play in that. But it's like anything else. If I understand the foundations, you know, I can understand how everything kind of functions. Which, if you just look at my journey, right, I wanted to do computer science because I want to understand how tech works. Like, I'm just inherently a person that loves to understand how things work.
Yeah. You talk a lot about compound interest, time, and it's this overall idea of measurement. Where did you get this idea here? Because that is in itself is very interesting. How you're talking about literally compound interest says you should have done it yesterday, but more specifically, when you're 23 years old and when you're 50 years old, that difference, I in my mind, usually that's not defined. So where are you getting these ideas, or are you just cultivating them in your mind?
No, I think so part of it comes down to how I'm wired. So we'll adopt that mindset for a second.
Yeah.
Right? So the mindset says, and we'll just make it crystal clear, it is whatever you want to achieve, you're a day late, right? So you're always behind. So when you have this mentality that you're never satisfied, your mind's telling you that you're always behind. So it creates a sense of panic that I need to catch up. And that's how I'm wired. That is why I wake up every day and can just get out of bed right away and just start working instantly and work until I go to bed. Because it's almost like being in fight or flight where you're saying, I need to catch up. I need to do this. It's the classic case of you have a paper due at 12, you start at 11:15, and somehow you always get done on time. It's the exact same perspective.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like my body has almost imposed on itself this artificial deadline that I'm always behind. And that's the easiest way to think about how I'm like functioning and how I think. That's the way to think about it. So if you apply that to the scenario of compounding, and I should have done it yesterday, that picture fits like a glove.
Right.
So you look at that and say, okay, I mean, I'll tell you, my to-do list never gets done, ever.
Doesn't that bother you?
It did. It doesn't anymore.
What changed?
I learned that you can always go deeper. You can always be doing more. But you don't want to sacrifice depth with quality, right? So I don't want to be doing 40 things. I want to be doing 5 things really well. I'm of the belief, and you saw this firsthand last semester, that for me has become somewhat toxic, right? You get a 4.0 with 6 classes. Next semester, it's 9. And that needs to stop, right? There needs to be a stopping point at some point. But it's like anything else. You prove to yourself that you can do it. That mindset is going to evolve. And this is the toxic side of it, that you can just keep doing more and more and more and more. So there needs to be a limit, for sure. So how do you find that limit? How does one discern where that limit is? I think it's, you learn over time, and this is what I've learned, I think, as I've gotten older, is it is actually more efficient to do things, for example, like don't pull on the letter, go to sleep for 8 hours. Because what you learn is, especially for me now, that I have to be doing things that have much higher cognitive function required, right? When you're doing quantum mechanics or quantum field theory versus sitting on a spreadsheet, it's inherently a lot more brain power that you have to use, especially when you're learning it for the first time, right? So that whole, I'm gonna not sleep for 2 days, that worked in finance, it doesn't cut it in finance, or it doesn't cut it in physics, for example. So you look at that and say, okay, now I just have to rewrite how I function, right? So now it's very strict. 6 hours sleep is my minimum. It used to be like 4.5 back in, a year and a half ago. Where now it's, what you learn is having things like a set gym schedule or all of that, right? That actually makes you more efficient. So those hours that you do spend working are actually more efficient. It's very simple. Like you have diminishing marginal return after a certain point. And that's what I think I've learned and defined for myself. Which I will tell you, from what I've heard from anecdotes from other people, is inherently seemingly higher than most people's, like what I need to function, whatever. But it's like anything else. You need to define that for yourself. And and it's just trial and error, right? Just, you figure it out over time. When do I feel tired? When do I not feel tired, right? It's just, you just need to listen to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell me about how you schedule out your days?
Yeah.
Just like, I'm just curious.
Yeah. So literally I have, on my iPad, I have my entire week. My entire week's already scheduled right now. Like you open it right now, it will have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And what I do is I have all of my classes up top, right? And I have all the assignments, or what are due when. And everything it's on black paper. So everything in white is what I need to do that day. Anything in yellow has to get done that day. So for me, it's a priority queue structure for my schedule.
Gotcha.
Right? So the yellows need to get done, no questions asked, right? And if I need to pull an all-nighter to get something done, it will get done, and I will not go to bed until all of yellow's done. White is, okay, these would be nice, but they're always in order of what should get done when. And I think with that structure, it's just, and this is a recent addition, is every day I have 2 hours between like 8:30 to 10:30. It's called my overflow period. So anything I didn't get done that I should have got done goes into the overflow period. And I still don't get everything done, but for me, it's now designed in a way that there's not things that are slipping, where I'm not missing deadlines or whatever, right? It is all of the things get done on time, things that I can quote unquote get ahead on, I get ahead on. You can't ever get ahead of the schedule, it's impossible. And at that point, you're always just treading water, right? No one's ever rescuing you. You're staying afloat barely. But for me, that means I'm maximizing productivity, and that's what I need to do. That's just how I structure my days and my time.
Okay, cool. One of the things that Ryan had said was that he thought that philosophy is more of the mind and thinking, where he would rather more applied, and where you could see a project and you could see it with your eyeballs and it's done. Yeah. Like I showed you that concepts when I came in, and it's phenomenal, but it's philosophical. And when you said, yeah, this is great, but there's really no application here. And that's the type of thing. So when you talk about prioritizing, when you talk about waking up and just being on overload, that fight or flight, I think a lot of people, and including myself sometimes, I get caught up in my head. Like I'll wake up and like I think I'm doing so much because I'm thinking so much.
Yeah.
Do you ever get caught up in that?
Yes, but I will tell you, and this is where the mental health, as we say, can be not the greatest, is if you're always busy, you never have time to, if you don't give yourself time to think, you don't have time to think.
Cool.
So think about it, right? If you're always behind, you're just thinking about I'm behind.
Right.
So you don't think about anything else.
Right.
So inherently, that's not even in my brain.
Right.
Most days.
Right.
That's why, for example, like when the semester's over, I hate breaks. If I take more than a 2-day break, I go insane.
So are you reflecting at all?
Like every day, or what do you mean?
Yeah, like
Oh, for sure, 100%.
Like reflection time, like.
But I think it's the sense of how laser focused I am. Like, so we'll draw an example. What am I thinking like when I'm not working, right? Like, what am the amount of times I'll look at structures, or we'll take what we did before the podcast. I was looking at that function. I was thinking about Fourier transforms, right? Like, I think in a lot of ways am so laser focused right now on all my physics stuff that I am only the time I'm not doing that, I'm still thinking about it. And that's where I think the passion comes in too. Like I always say, I would do what I'm doing now this summer. I would do it for free, for sure, 100%. And I'd love it, right? So you look at that and say, okay, that is what I think about. I don't really get into the whole, everyone has good days, bad days, whatever it might be. But I don't think I overthink because you recognize that every day I have something to do. I have yellows on my to-do list every day. So those need to get done. So that's always going to be top of mind, right? It's once I'm done work, to get those done, then move on to the next thing. And just move on to the next thing. Move on.
Yeah.
But now that those to-do lists are now driven by passion, I always tell people this. If I'm taking a class now in any subject, we'll take quantum mechanics, right? They say a lot of physics majors hate that class. But if you take classes like that and you're saying, I need to be good at this for my research, it's a completely different way of taking a class. It's no longer the class you have to take, right? It's the class I want to take. And that is the difference between something you should be doing, and if you don't have that, whatever you're doing, whether it's work, job, school, or anything in between, you need to make a change, for sure. Right? Because in everything you can find that.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Like that mindset is just, it's a complete change.
But I will say, and this is where you need to be careful, you should also be doing the things that you don't want to do. And that's like, so think about it from the perspective of, in the honors college, you have to take all these classes, like ideas that change the world, for example. I didn't want to take that class, right? I thought it was stupid. I took it, loved it. Great way of thinking. And in some capacity that laid my roots to go to LLC, for sure, 100%. So you also, I think, need to recognize what things are good for you. And not to get too deep into this, but I think this is especially true right now. This whole ChatGPT AI boom. If you look at my Twitter right now, I have been harping on the fact all the computer science majors, I'm said you should be coding without AI. People writing papers, write your own paper. You can get it to check it. You're doing problem sets to get to check it, that's fine. You need to be thinking for yourself. Because a first study came out last week that people's cognitive abilities are drastically declining from ChatGPT and all these different AI tools. And I think in a world where you only have your brain, that's a crazy, scary thing to think about. So all of these things of thinking for yourself and being disciplined, whatever, I think that sense of discipline actually needs to carry over, especially now. Right? Like you need to have the discipline that I could go use ChatGPT. No, just do your own work, Or even simple things, like even the change I've made in the last 2 weeks, which has been game changing, is don't just prompt ChatGPT for any question you have. Go back to Google, right? Just look up web pages. The act of finding information yourself, learning it yourself, is so much more valuable than just having ChatGPT answer every question. Because I guarantee you can look at ChatGPT, and this happened to me, and so I know. You'll say, oh, I understand that, and you just keep asking, oh, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? And you might be right, but that versus watching a 2-hour lecture where you're hand taking notes, very different level of comprehension.
Like you really hit it on the head there. it reminded me of this idea of like social media where you're like, man, like I've been doing this for a couple days. I love it. Like I only do social media 1 hour a night, like that type of idea. And you just had to express that in ChatGPT mind where you're like, look, like I search things up for myself.
You know what's crazy? On that part of social media, actually, again, you'll find I'm an academic at heart. There was a study that came out literally last week on social media usage. People that refrained from using Instagram or like just deleted all their social media in general was the equivalent of going on like all these different like medications and like going to therapy and all these different things and like all these different tools, right? It's like anything else. Go pick up people just need to pick up a book, you know? Like if people are like TikTok or all these different things, right? Well, that's another thing. All the social media people have horrible attention spans. And that's, I think, actually a really underrated point now that we're thinking of this is the ability to do what I do is only inherently possible because I have a very long attention span. Where I can go sit in my room for 12 hours and not move, other than to like get food and go to the bathroom. But your memory is a muscle, like your ability to do things like that is a muscle. And everyone's muscles are so weak, right? That are, especially our generation. And you see it, right? You go outside, people are sitting on their phones, whatever, and we have a very instant gratification culture. And this comes back, my senior quote in high school, in my yearbook, and I think it's especially true now, and I believe I didn't find this anywhere. So if someone else quoted this, I don't want to say it was my idea, but in my mind, I created this quote, and it is short-term satisfaction does not equal long-term happiness. But we are such an instant gratification culture nowadays that you just need to be disciplined not to fall into that trap. Because you don't fall into that trap, your mental health gets better, your focus gets better, your performance of whatever you're doing also gets better, you connect with people more. It's like anything else, right? It's literally just this compounding effect. But what we also know about compounding is it works in the opposite way.
100%.
1000%.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like, yeah. The way I see the AI and the way I see the ChatGPT is like it just started. Like it just has begun. Yeah. So I like last year I was writing papers on my own and doing all those things, but now I'm writing my whole paper, but then I'll stick it in the ChatGPT and be like, hey man, like how does this look? And they'll be like,
your own tutor. Yeah.
Actually, and then I think a lot of the time when you say something, I think the AI literally just like says, yeah, you're on a great path, like of some capacity every time.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that actually is like short wiring in itself.
Well, it's like anything else, right? So the hallucinogenic nature of language models is really interesting, right? So say, for example, I go put into my Shakespeare now something about quantum mechanics. It will instantly be like, and this applies to satellite quantum networking, because it's like this hallucinogenic chamber that I'm like thinking about. I'm like, no, it's like this is an isolated concept, right? And we also see all the research now that AIs don't actually think. They don't actually do math. They don't actually think critically. It's just they're good at pattern matching.
Right.
Right, and we could go, oh my god, I wrote a whole paper on like what is intelligence, how to define intelligence. That's a whole other podcast topic.
Yeah.
It's like anything else. You need to be able to think for yourself. And I dislike the analogy that people say, oh, using ChatGPT is like going to be giving a kid who knows long division a calculator. It's totally different. A calculator cannot do differential equations. You know, like that's not how that works.
Yeah.
So.
Autonomy is, and I think you have that, and I think you intentionally have that. And if that quote was in your high school book at that time, that's impressive.
Well, I also think I've been really trying to just spread that message.
Yeah.
Just saying like, hey guys, like you like, right? Because there is a huge part of me. I'm like worried for our generation's cognitive ability.
Well, so am I. And you and I are on the same age, so the fact that you had that in high school is very. How did you get turned on in this idea, actually?
I think part of it is when you are just, I think it's just academia as a whole, right? Like academia as a whole, it's like inherently based on how good of an idea you have. And when you're in a lab by yourself, testing something that's never been done before, you have to have a somewhat delusional sense of self-confidence that that's going to work out. And if it doesn't work out, you need to be like, I'm going to try to show up and do it again, right? So I'd say that's part of it. I'm trying to think. I also think too, I just saw a lot of people around me in high school just doing, 17, 18-year-old things. And I was always just of the belief of, that's not happiness. Like, what? Like, is that? And I get it. You grow up, you need to experience different things, whatever. But I think it was just very foundationally. Like, you take that message and you say, it's nothing more than looking at the self-image of yourself and saying, is that what I want to be? And if you're not, that's okay. Especially when you're 16, 17, everyone's a different person. But you gotta change it, So, but I don't know. But beyond that, I couldn't really tell you where that came from.
Yeah.
No.
Wait, can you give me a timeline here about when you had that horrific situation happen to you? Is that before you were 18 years old?
That would have been, I was 17, 18, around there.
Okay, so
before I graduated.
Okay, so right before that, were you feeling the same way though? Were you looking at the stuff and still thinking this is not happiness, like running around doing crazy things?
To an extent, if anything, actually, I'd say after that happened, I became a little bit more lax, right? I started seeing people more. It wasn't all about swimming. It wasn't swimming, but I mean, part of that too, I think, was just like you're going off to college or end of senior year, so you start kind of like chilling out a little bit. Also, candidly, when the valedictorian spot was clutched, I didn't have to try very hard in that regard, right? It was especially, and that's also when COVID started too. So that also was a huge thing right there. Mm-hmm. But no, I think that was all those things together kind of brewed this perfect storm of just who do I want to be in the future, and I come back to that, and that's who I want to be. And it hasn't changed. It's the same narrative. It's been gone through iterations, but if you think about foundationally speaking, where I'm coming from, everything that I've done in my life has been very intentional, and it's been very nonlinear, for sure. But just because it's nonlinear doesn't mean it wasn't intentional.
Yeah, I think it's actually a fantastic place to start. And I'd love to do something like this again, but that's it for me. Yeah, you got anything else or what?
No, this is good. This is fun. I don't know, thinking about my life and story. I don't think I've ever said it in one go. So it is interesting though. I think about these things often, right? Like, I think the biggest question I always ask myself is, why am I wired the way that I am? Because it's really interesting. I don't even know the answer.
So you see it so you have this like bird's eye view.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And that's not common. I need you to know that. Like, that's really, it's not a common thing. It's really difficult to have that. And sometimes even somebody like yourself could have that bird's eye view and then drop out of that bird's eye view. Boom.
Yeah. No, and that's why I think what's interesting is things like that, I don't even know where that comes from. But no, I understand the perception. And I can look at myself and say, I don't know why the hell I'm wired the way I am. It's weird. It's crazy. In a lot of ways, I'm like wild, Like, I look at last semester and said, how the hell did I do 9 courses, write a 140-page dissertation, and work a part-time job, and was trained for the Boston Marathon? Like, what? And I was like, oh yeah, that happened. I don't know. So I understand that's not normal, for sure.
Beautiful, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on.
Likewise.
Thank you, Connor.
Pleasure.